Sharon, a lot's been happening over the last several months. As I mentioned, we have COVID and wildfires and Black Lives Matter and an election and the further destruction of our environment with climate change. And so a lot of people are afraid, worried. There's also been an increase in a sense of loneliness and isolation, which you talk about extensively in your book. It's even before COVID, there's this epidemic of loneliness, as you put it, and so much suffering. One of the things I really love about your approach and your writings is that you make it clear that it's okay to feel what we feel. And even in that meditation, we're breathing anyway. Our job is just to feel it, to notice it. And, in the midst of everything happening in our world and in our family life and with the economy and many people losing their jobs, there's this increased feeling of anger, loneliness, anxiety, depression. And, I think it would be easy to write a book about real change in the sense that we have to fight and we have to go for our vision at all costs, and we have to do it with a sense of love and peace in our hearts from day one. But that's just not the reality for 99% of us. We have these challenging emotions arising in us. And you make it clear that it's okay to actually be angry. And I was very struck by the section about anger. Anger can actually be a really good thing, or it can be very useful for us. It's not this thing that we have to run away from or smother with love or get rid of, and I think in some Buddhist circles or spiritual circles, there's some contradictory teachings around anger. And you make it very clear it's okay to feel angry. If we don't feel anger, we're not paying attention sometimes. You quoted that quote. And later on in the book, you mentioned that it's also okay not to feel forgiveness right away if we feel like we've been harmed or someone close to us has been harmed. It's okay not to feel the need to cross that bridge too soon. And so there's a lot of this maybe self-judgment around how we should feel versus how we actually are feeling. So could you speak to that that notion that it's actually okay to feel what we feel, even in the midst of fighting for something to be different?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot in there, and that is great. So first I should say I don't, generally speaking, choose my book titles. And somehow I got on the real train, with Real Happiness, and then someone else chose Real Happiness at Work and Real Love, and Real Change was actually a joke title for a long time because it felt like, okay, it goes in the sequence. We didn't know what else to call it, and then it stuck. But I'm in many ways appreciating the word real or realistic more than I ever did before. I have a friend, Bob Thurman, who's a Buddhist scholar, and his favorite word is realistic. And I used to hear him and think, that's kind of boring, who wants to be realistic about things? But as time has gone on, I've grown to respect that idea more and more, meaning being in harmony with the truth of how things are. Because anything else is going to disempower us. We're going to be at some weird oblique angle to how things are, and in some state of denial or futile protestation. I don't want it to be this way. Well, this is how it is. And that doesn't mean we get inert or passive or we don't take action. But I think the best place to take action from is in that kind of full acknowledgement of how things are. And sometimes how things are, internally or externally, are full of suffering. And so there's a lot in what you said. First of all, with certain feelings, even in a very classical Buddhist sense, as you know, we don't have to call feelings of greed or jealousy or anger or fear bad or wrong. We can understand them as states of suffering, which they are, and whether it's ours or someone else's. And there's states that make our lives, if we are lost in them, and that's sort of the whole point. Feeling something is very different than being overcome by it, defined by it, led around by it. And that's where we have a lot of power and choice, just through being able to pay attention in a different way. I think it's kind of unjust to oneself and even cruel to say, well, I shouldn't feel this. I shouldn't be afraid anymore. I should have stopped grieving long ago. I should be beyond this. I've been meditating now for like 7,000 years. Why do I still feel this? Which makes no sense, because we feel what we feel. When conditions come together for something to arise, it will arise. We can affect those conditions for sure, but we can't absolutely control them or dominate them. And our real power lies in what do we do with something when it's come up. And anger would be a really good example of that. It's a complex feeling. It's not a simple thing. We feel what we feel, and we have to allow every feeling the dignity of its presence, and recognize, okay, this is what's happening right now. Something like anger is usually very layered. And if we can be mindful of it and pay attention to it without either condemning it or ourselves, or just saying, yes, I'm going to do this vengeful thing and then that, we learn a lot. I've seen, sitting with anger, the layers of sadness, the layers of fear. And almost always in there's like a kernel of helplessness. In Tibetan Buddhism, they say anger is what we pick up when we feel weak because we think it's going to make us strong. And its strength is the energy. There's a kind of cutting through energy of anger, which is very needed, actually. And we know sometimes in a meeting, in a gathering, remember when we used to have gatherings, sometimes it's the angriest person in the room that is insisting that everybody looks at that problem, and everyone else is kind of studiously looking the other way, not wanting to face it. And they're saying, no, look at that. So we actually rely on that cutting through energy. But when a person is consumed by it or overcome by it, when it really becomes kind of a way of life, it's very destructive. And the Buddhist psychology talks about anger as being like a forest fire, which burns up its own support. It can destroy the host. And like a fire, it can range very wild and we might end up someplace we actually don't want to be. So the big question for us becomes, how do we harness the energy of it? That kind of cutting through possibility without getting consumed by it. Now, this is not easy, but it's actually almost like a characteristic of mindfulness that it helps us do that. And I, use the words and testimony of a lot of activists in the book about their own experience of just that. And in fact, when I was writing the book, I thought, what would be cool is to quote Gandhi for saying, and again, this is not putting ourselves down effort for what we feel, but it's the difference between feeling something and being lost in it. So I thought, I can use that Gandhi quote where he said something like, being lost in anger is like drinking poison and thinking it's going to kill the other guy. So then I looked it up because I wanted to put it in the book, so I had to source it. And I never saw it attributed to Gandhi at all. I saw it attributed to the Buddha and Oprah Winfrey and the Big Book of AA and Carrie Fisher and Nelson Mandela. I have no idea who said it, but it's very wise, so it's not because what we're feeling is bad or injudicious. It's because out of compassion for ourselves, we decide, do I want to get dedicated to this and just keep getting overcome by it, or do I want to find another way? The other way is not dismissing it, but utilizing the energy of it.